Hello everyone and welcome back to Geotech Masters. We have really put a lot of effort into working hard in the field. We have scratched rocks to find their strengths, measured cracked angles with a compass, and calculated RQD percentages. You might be asking, why did we collect all this specific data? Today you get your answer. We are going to talk about rock mass classification. This is where we take all those separate observations, strengths, RQD, spacing, roughness, and combine them into a single number. We'll look at the ISO 14689 standard. It points us toward famous systems like RMR, the Q system, and GSI. These systems turn your descriptive logs into actual engineering design parameters for tunnels, slopes, and foundations. This is where geology turns into engineering. Let's see how it works.
Before we start, let's frame this with some big questions. First, if you have two different rock sites, how do you objectively say one is good and the other is fair? We need a scoring system, just like a test in school. Second, how does a tunnel engineer know how many rock bolts to use just by looking at your borehole log? There is a direct link between your daily field reports and the safety of a tunnel. And finally, with so many systems out there, RMR, Q, GSI, RMI, which one does the ISO standard recommend? We will answer these questions in this session. Let's look at what the standard says. It acknowledges that there are many rock mass classification systems used for engineering design. It states that the state of the rock mass should be determined using one of these schemes whenever appropriate. However, ISO 14689 itself does not define the rules for RMR or Q. Instead, ISO 14689 provides the standardized inputs. Think of it like cooking. ISO 14689 teaches you how to select and prepare the ingredients, the rock descriptions. The classification systems, like RMR, are the recipes that tell you how to bake the cake, the design. You cannot bake a good cake with bad ingredients. That is why your logging matters. Most of these systems are what we call multi-parameters.